Hello, welcome to the Lived Experience with Problem Solving webinar for employers. We're so glad that you all could join us today. A couple of housekeeping matters. You are all muted, as I'm sure you expected. We do ask that if you have questions as we go along, that you go ahead and put them in the chat box, which will go to our host. We have a Q&A session at the end. And if you are on the phone and you want to ask a question, during the Q&A, you can raise your hand. I have the privilege of introducing to you our National President, Mr. Mark Riccobono. So we're gonna let Mark take it away.
Thank you, Patty, and good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming to our presentation today. We really appreciate it, and we hope that you'll find it interesting and informative, and that it'll be the beginning of your partnering with the National Federation of the Blind. To start off, I want to let you know that the National Federation of the Blind knows that blindness is not the characteristic that defines you or your future. And every day we work on raising the expectations of blind people because we recognize that low expectations create obstacles between blind people and our dreams. That you can live the life you want, and blindness is not what holds you back. And in 2020, one of the measures of success in society is employment. And for blind people, the statistics are really bad, meaning blind people are unemployed or underemployed at a rate that would shock any other segment of society. And the problem is that mostly society expects blind people to be unemployed and believes that it's okay for blind people to be underemployed because the expectations are so low. We know that if you're here participating with us today, it's because you think there might be a better path forward, and we want to work with you on that. Fact of the matter is that with the right training and opportunities, blind people are employed in almost any aspect of work that you can think of. From manual labor to the highest of white-collar professions, doing very scientific work, technical work, to manual labor work. Blind people are doing the range of activities, and when they have the right training and how to operate as a blind person effectively, which we provide through our organization and our training programs, and the opportunities to prove their skills, blind people are doing those things. We want to work to continue to raise those expectations. A lot of people claim to have the solution to help improve the employment rate for blind people. And the truth is there's not a silver bullet. It is an ecosystem of things that need to happen, and engaging with employers who are interested in diversity, equity, and inclusion, and how to do that correctly from an authentic blind perspective is critical. So we're glad you're here, and we're prepared to work with you on whatever stage you're at to create opportunities together to help blind people advance in your organizations, and to make sure that the work that you're doing serves as a model for other employers. So I appreciate the opportunity to be here, and I look forward to the work we're going to do together in the future. I'm going to turn you back to the rest of the team for some great discussions. So thank you, Patty, and thank you to the team for putting this webinar together.
Thank you, President Riccobono. What a great synopsis and beginning to our webinar. We're going to hear next from a gentleman who's had a lot of hats in the National Federation of the Blind. His current major hat is the Executive Director of Blindness Initiatives. I give you Anil Lewis.
Thanks, Patti, and I agree. Thanks, President Riccobono, for kicking us off. I want to fill in some of the substance, but first I want to welcome all of you for participating. Just by signing up, you've already expressed a commitment to what we're trying to do here, and hopefully this is the beginning of the communication that we'll all share in order to create better opportunities and more opportunities for blind individuals to live the lives they want. So I want to start by saying the reason that we chose lived experience of problem solving is because we're trying to make our particular initiative normal in your space. And the way that we do that is hopefully by showing that there's value from the start, of really considering, hiring individuals who are blind or low vision, because we have a lived experience, and every day we acquire skills that allow us to live in a world that's not made for blind people. We have to adapt on the fly. We have to learn as we go. And these are problem-solving skills that I think that any employer would want on their team. Just through our lived experience and the need to develop and be dynamic around skills acquisition and implementation of various strategies to live our own lives, we recognize that we add value to any team that's out there. So I want to start right there because many employers, unfortunately, have the perception that in order to hire blind people, that they're doing it because of some moral value system. And that's not true, because if that's the reason, if that's the catalyst, then those are going to be the first ones out of the door in those instances where businesses have to trim the fat. We want the employers to recognize that blind people can contribute to be competitive and beneficial participants on any team in any employment environment. As President Bono said, at every level of employment. Many people relegate blind people to those entry-level jobs, but we also want opportunities, to be executives. And I'm blessed to be an executive director with the National Federation of the Blind. So in order for us to really do that, we have to also recognize or get the employers to recognize that a blind employee should be held to the same standard as any other employee. Again, I've seen so many employers working with every good intent to onboard a blind person in their employment space. And then they feel like they have to make different exceptions for that blind employee. And that's really not going to be helpful for the individual or for the entity. When you make exceptions, again, you're setting that blind employee up to be the first one out of the door in times of crisis. And you don't want that to happen because, again, because of our lived experience, we can be very helpful in times of crisis because many times I leave the house every day and I run into an unanticipated crisis and I have to solve my way through it. So you have to hold those blind employees to the same standard of performance. And when you do that, you come up with creative ideas of making sure that a blind person can be effective. And let me give a quick example. I worked with the call center with Wachovia National Bank back in the day when that was a thing before it got acquired by the bigger banks. And we hired some blind individuals. So first, the first blind person that came through, we dedicated a lot of time and energy in making sure they were onboarded and that they were able to do the job. And once the employer found out, wow, this person can really do the job very productively, give me more blind people. So that was cool. So it opened up an opportunity for us to hire more blind individuals in that environment. But then we realized in our whole onboarding process to make sure that the blind staff was also, feeling welcome by the other members of the team, recognized that there was a little bit of, concern from the sighted staff because the blind individuals weren't doing the work related to all the printed documentation because we were able to use assistive technology to give them access to the digital information, but not the print information. So rather than making an exception, by the way, I need to offer that prior to this whole issue, part of the dissent was because the blind employees were at the top 10 percentile of the productivity scale. But once we got that in place and realized that there was an exception being made, we found a way to normalize it. So what we did was we turned the office into a completely paperless office. We moved all of the work to a digital platform. So that means that now the blind people being held to the same expectation can perform the same task, all of the tasks required of other individuals in their same positions. And two beautiful things that came out of that. One is now the dissent is gone and the blind individuals are able to do the full and complete job. And two, it increased productivity for the whole office. So by going paperless, it increased productivity for even the sighted employees. So again, holding the blind individual to the same standard as the sighted individual not only creates opportunities for the blind person to demonstrate capacity, but it also could potentially work out into interventions or strategies that increase productivity for everyone involved. So to really get to that point, we have to get to the place where we really understand the true problems with blindness. And a lot of people think it's because of the blindness, and it's not. Blindness just means I can't see. I know it sounds ridiculous, but that's just really the truth. It doesn't mean that I can't do all of the things that everyone else is able to do, but unfortunately society has those low expectations, and it's based on their lack of knowledge and appreciation of blind people. So the National Federation of the Blind works diligently every day to educate society that blind people have capacity and provide educational opportunities like this one to prove that. And it's those low expectations. If we can get past those low expectations and set high, at least equal, but even higher expectations, you have greater results. The fact that in the Wachovia description that the expectation was for the blind person to do the job and the whole job, again, resulted in economies of scale that increase efficiencies across the office. So we have to continue to combat those low expectations and try to find creative, strategic ways to make sure that blind people can be fully integrated into the workforce. I think it's important really quickly to show you some, and we can do this in a more robust way if you follow up with us after this presentation, the alternative skills that blind people use to be productive every day. As a blind person, I know I'm a thumbnail on your screen, but I've been reading my little notes on this little Braille cue card. I have in my lap here a refreshable Braille display that allows me to access my computer information. So I know Braille, and that helps me access information. I travel with a long white cane, which allows me to independently travel throughout my environment. Many employers wonder if I hire a blind person, who's going to help them to the bathroom or to the lunchroom. That's not a thing. Blind people can independently navigate their environments. And the access technology, the computers, et cetera, make it possible for blind people to be extremely competitive in any work environment. And it's through those alternative skills that we want to make sure that our value and our worth is integrated into the opportunities that you may have for blind people to be part of your work environment. So we appreciate the fact that you're including blindness in your definition of what you consider diversity, equity, and inclusion. And again, please reach out to us if we can be of further assistance. I'll turn it back to Patti.
Thank you. My name is Patti Chang, and I serve as Director of Outreach. So part of what I do is help build relationships. I want to talk to you about some of the relationships that we have already existing and give you examples of what kind of things that we build relationships around. But I want to begin with a caveat. Every relationship is different. And what that means is that if you see a synergy that you want to explore, please feel free to do so. These are just examples. You know, I used to be a lawyer, so my caveat's really the following, but not limited to. So I want to start with volunteerism. We partner with Nielsen, yes, the same company that does your TV ratings, and they come in and they have employees that come to our national center and help pack up things that go out to children. Now, it's not so much important the exact activity that they do, but that gives Nielsen employees interactive time with blind people. And one of the best ways to build diversity and inclusion is to take away that fear factor. You do that by breeding familiarity. The other volunteer opportunity that I wanted to chat with you about is we have entities like Wells Fargo that are nationwide. We're nationwide. We have 52 affiliates and we have 500 chapters. And I noticed that we have someone on the line from the Lighthouse in Chicago. So you can afford your employees volunteer opportunities all over the country. And I mentioned the Lighthouse for the Chicago Lighthouse because they partner with our Illinois affiliate in providing and helping to provide volunteers around our Braille Enrichment for Literacy and Learning programs that we run in the summer. You can do the same kind of thing. One of the most popular avenues to partnering with us, in fact, many of our partners start here, is with our Center for Excellence in Non-Visual Access. The Center for Excellence in Non-Visual Access, also known as CENA, is really a centralized area where you can gain the expertise of blind people. You can find best practices and resources that help your company or organization build in accessibility. So access to information, services, et cetera. That's one of the win-wins. Of course, any relationship has to be synergistic and has to be a win on both sides. Clearly, the National Federation of the Blind wants more accessible options. And many companies want to provide more accessibility, but may not be so sure how to do this. So within the CNET are several different programs. You can explore all of them, but I want to highlight a couple. We have trainings that are provided throughout the year. So we do boutiques, say on EPUB or how to make Adobe documents accessible. And in fact, I see one coming up before too long on accessibility on a budget. You're welcome to send especially your IT people to attend this so that they can keep accessibility in mind with regard to all kinds of things you provide. The second one that I want to highlight is called Build, and I'm actually a member in Build. It's kind of cool. Blind users innovating for leading design. Again, we spoke back to the expertise of blind people. Well, we have 50,000 members. I don't think many people have access to that wide range of blind folks. If you need to get something tested, maybe you want to test the accessibility of a new app or your website. If you want opinions on the services you provide and how you can best provide those with universal design in mind in terms of blindness, you can fill out a simple form and we will then help you find people of all backgrounds, of all levels of education, and I think most importantly, of all levels of expertise to help you test and get feedback. Many times your experts that you have inside your organization who are doing adaptive tech, for example, well, their expertise level is high. So they use workarounds without even thinking about it, that maybe the average person like me might not know how to do. I want to talk for a minute about national convention opportunities. Our national convention is the largest gathering of blind people anywhere. Our last in-person convention, I think our numbers topped out at around 3,300 registrants, attendees. And when we went to a virtual format this year, we had 10,000 individual logins at a time, which was our highest number. And who knows how many people that really is, because some of us log in together. You would have access to do things like exhibit, or you can afford yourself with a lot of marketing opportunities by sponsoring. And if you want information on that, I'll give you an email at the end. You can send for information. But I think the biggest opportunity that relates to you all on this webinar is our career track. The career track affords seminars for job seekers, blind job seekers, for employers interested in hiring blind people, and it culminates with the largest career fair with blind job seekers that exist anywhere. You can get lots of information on the career fair, again, you can email the same email, outreach@nfb.org. And that actually ties into the next thing I want to talk about, which is some of our employment resources. We have a jobs listserv that I think all of you are probably interested in. You can sign up and then you can post your own job listings on this listserv, and that's all that goes on this listserv. We have 1,000 people signed up right now for the job listserv, so that gives you access to current job seekers at all different levels from all over the country. And I've even seen some of them that are from outside the country. If you don't want to post every job listing that you have, maybe you're a larger entity, you can periodically post an invitation for our job seekers to go to your website and check it out. Now I want to talk a little bit about some of our more unique partnerships that don't fit into any of these categories and help bring home some of the ways that we partner so that you can think creatively about this. We have a partnership with Lyft, and Lyft does the sponsorship that I talked about, which is a valuable thing for both of us. But lately we've been partnering with Lyft around Get Out the Vote. They wanted to give discount coupons so that they could help people get to the polls, but they don't have access to as many blind people as we do. So we're just helping push that out and administer it. And then the other example that I want to give is Humanware has a internship program, and Humanware wanted to magnify the invitation to apply. They weren't getting as many applicants as they wanted. We have a national scholarship program, and that usually gets 500 or 600 applications a year. So now when students apply for our scholarship, they have an option to apply for the Humanware internship. So please think outside the box about what you need and what we might benefit from also, and then bring it back to us. And finally, one of the most interesting partnerships that we're developing right now is actually with a children's app. It's called Pinna. Pinna has contacted us initially about the fact that they want to consult because they have a blind character on one of their podcasts who is awesomely played by a blind actress that they sent to school to train her. But we have also built that partnership into looking at the accessibility of their app and helping with that. And we're going back and forth about the next season so that maybe they can magnify some of our messaging. All right, those are just a few examples, and I want to close with really what I started with, which is be as broad in your thinking as you can be, and keep us in mind. You can email outreach@nfb.org if you want to set up time to explore this possible synergies. I'm going to turn this over next to a gentleman who doesn't work for the National Federation of the Blind, but he works with us all the time. He serves on our employment committee, and he is in fact an employer himself. He really provides a case study in hiring blind folks. So I'm going to turn it over to John Dubay.
Thank you, Patti. I appreciate that. And thank you, Anil, and also President Riccobono. I think, as Patti said, I'm here as an employer, so I'm going to kind of put a bow around probably a lot of what you already heard from everybody today and give you some specific examples. So let me start by reminding everybody that we're here today to recognize October 2020 as the 75th observance of National Disability Employment Awareness Month. But as you're picking up here already, October isn't the only month we should be thinking about and discussing disability and inclusion when it comes to our hiring practices within each of our organizations. Let me give you a little background. When I started my company, Leads at Scale, in 2013, and I initially hired, as a startup, I hired one sighted person and one blind person. Little bit of a background, we provide support services to our clients' businesses throughout the US and Canada. Inbound and outbound call centers, customer and patient satisfaction surveys, customer retention work, sales support, product registration, that type of thing. Really the common thread in our business is communication and relationship building, right? Helping our clients connect with their customers at all stages of the customer life cycle. As we grew and needed to hire more, I realized that the skill set consistently being delivered by the blind and visually impaired was much stronger than the skill set I was seeing from the other candidates that were coming in the door. So I completely changed our business model. And now 100% of our employees are either blind or visually impaired. Obviously this was a pretty significant shift for my company. The second major shift came when I realized that we could recruit and hire the best and the brightest candidates anywhere throughout the United States if we were able to offer a remote working model. So we undertook this challenge, and we've been operating in a remote work environment, providing these services since 2015. And why that's important is that we've been able to hire great candidates that we wouldn't have had access to otherwise as a result. Particularly in these past couple of months, I like to joke that we were remote before remote was cool. And, again, we've been able to target and hire the best and the brightest candidates across the United States. That's with the current pandemic and everything going on, obviously something that's at least in the front of our minds, or it should be right now. So at that point, my goals for the company became centered obviously around creating professional employment and advancement opportunities for the blind and visually impaired. And really, we haven't looked back. This experience has been fantastic from my perspective. But let me share with you, like many of you, I suspect, in my line of work, I speak with people all day long. And in my conversations with businesses around the country, consistently I hear things like, I understand, John, but my business is different. I couldn't hire a blind or a visually impaired person here because I don't know if they could perform the job. My work site is too dangerous for someone who can't see. I'd have to make too many changes. It'd be too risky. I don't know if they'd fit in. What if I hire somebody and they don't work out? I wouldn't be able to get rid of them. And on and on. The excuses seem to mount. My response is always the same because I've heard all of these excuses way too many times. And it's usually something like, tell me if that's your reasoning, doesn't that mean your work site could be too unsafe for others as well? Or tell me, do you ask yourself these same questions when you hire somebody who's sighted? If not, I suggest you better start. But the point is, change the perspective a little here. Usually at this point in the conversation, I hear how they would just love to be able to hire a blind and visually impaired candidate. But they simply couldn't because of they're in a manufacturing business, or because they need a very specialized or targeted talent or skill set, because their work is too technical, et cetera, et cetera. The list always seems to grow. Now, I don't know if you're aware of the statistics, and President Riccobono touched on it earlier in his comments, but the unemployment rate and underemployment rate for the blind and visually impaired in the United States is over 70%, 70%. And actually that figure comes from before the pandemic, business shutdowns, furloughs, and everything else that we're going through right now. So at the same time, over the past couple of years, I've spoken to business leaders around the country who bemoan the difficulty of finding enough well-qualified candidates to hire. What a strange situation. On one hand, we have businesses struggling to find enough well-qualified candidates to hire. And on the other, we have a significant pool of talent where more than 7 in 10 people is unemployed. I suspect you're like me and saying, that's just plain crazy. So let me pick up a little bit here where Anil left off and share some real world examples with you from a couple of organizations I'm involved with. First, as Patti said, the National Federation of the Blind. I proudly serve on the employment committee and have been very actively involved in our career fairs, both with the employers and the job seekers. As Patti was saying, we hold our career fairs twice a year, once in February in Washington, D.C., and again in the summer during our national convention. Last year we had at our career fair, over 50 employers participate and more than 350 job seekers participate. According to the reviews I saw, it was a great success and a great resource for both the employers and the job seekers who participated. The feedback that we received is that they all seem to have gained quite a bit from the experience and all have benefited from that. I also serve on the advisory council for the Inland Northwest Lighthouse for the Blind. We've got 3 locations in Seattle, Spokane, Washington, and Summerville, South Carolina. Now, I highlight these couple of organizations because during my involvement with these and other organizations, as well as my own business, I've seen a number of job functions successfully performed by blind and visually employed or visually impaired employees every day. As an example, at the NFB's career fair in Las Vegas last year, my contact from the CIA, who also, by the way, happens to be blind, was extremely excited to have interviewed a gentleman with a PhD in physics. This is a position she had been trying to recruit for quite a while, and she was really excited about that. She couldn't wait to get him scheduled for a second interview. One of our other participants at the employer level was the FBI. I contacted the FBI, was excited to have found a couple of candidates who are attorneys. I hope one of them wasn't you, Patti. At the end of the, at the Inland Northwest Lighthouse for the Blind, employers there manufacture all of the whiteboards, cork boards, glass wall boards, and easels that ACO sells in Office Depot and Staples stores around the country. They also are manufacturing litters, we call them in the layman's terms stretchers, the entrenchment tools, the folding military shovels, and hydro packs and canteens, all for the US military. And they manufacture over 187,000 parts per month for the Boeing 737 model and later aircraft. Let's take a second and let me ask you, do you still think the blind and visually impaired's potential or job skills are too narrow or too limited? These examples may seem a little anecdotal, so let me pull it back here and share with you the reasons that we hired the blind and visually impaired at my company. Personally, I've been completely impressed with the skill set the blind and visually impaired consistently bring to the table. I think I've touched on that a little earlier here myself. The blind and visually impaired are experienced problem solvers. They bring a greater creativity and ingenuity. Their communication skills are wonderful. Their active listening skills, unmatched. The attention to detail always impresses me. They think outside of the box, have a greater sense of empathy, and really just possess many other transferable skills that we're all searching for, but rarely find at the same level with other candidates. Now, I learned a long time ago that we can teach the technical skills in our business, but we need our candidates to bring the appropriate soft skills and a positive attitude to the partnership. I suspect you're in a similar position in your industry or your organization. With that said, at my company, we have exactly the same expectations of the blind and visually impaired candidates we hire as we would if we were working with sighted employees. Why? Really at the end of the day, after all, the work needs to still get done for our clients. It doesn't matter whether we're sighted or blind or visually impaired. Our clients hire us for a reason, and that's to get the job done. And we do for them. Given this wide range of skill sets, you may be wondering, or let me help you transition or imagine some of this, what roles we've hired and utilized the blind and visually impaired for in our company. So, just thinking and naming a few, obviously the customer service, call center agents, but also sales, marketing, quality assurance, supervisors, HR with interviewing, hiring, and onboarding, coaching, client services, account management, data entry, accounting. The list is almost endless. You add backgrounds in manufacturing, logistics, PhDs in physics, attorneys, and many more, and the benefits just grow exponentially. I wonder really out loud, what role, I challenge you, couldn't you match a blind or visually impaired candidate for in your organization? Let me just kind of summarize or close here by reminding each of us again that while we're celebrating National Disability Employment Awareness Month, October isn't the only month we should be focused and thinking about disability and inclusion within our organizations, particularly when each of us are faced day in and day out with the challenge of recruiting and hiring the best and the brightest candidates that we can find. Lastly, on a side note, let me offer, if I can be a resource, answer any questions, act as a sounding board, or help in any way, I'd encourage you to reach out to me directly. I think my contact information is going to be included later in the presentation. And I'm always happy to speak with anybody about this journey, how it's benefited my company, and how I think it will benefit your organization. With that, I'm going to turn it back over to Patti, and we can have our Q&A session. Thank you very much for participating, and thank you everybody for the other information.
Thank you, John. What a powerful case study in what we really want, which is equality of opportunity. You know, John isn't doing this because he thinks it's the right thing to do, which is a problem, as Anil mentioned. He's doing it because it's the right thing to do for his business. And that's such a win-win, and that's what employment of blind people is all about. So we're going to turn to question and answers. And I did want to point out that if you're on a phone, *9 will raise your hand, and then we can unmute you. Otherwise, I assume that people have been putting questions in the chat. Stacy, what do we have?
Yes, so we did receive a few questions ahead of the webinar today. So why don't we start with a couple of those. The first question, how can we help or support employees who experience vision loss gradually or suddenly while on the job?
I'm going to be very open that that employee is going to need some training. And that can't be done well in a haphazard way. So you can encourage, first of all, you can refer to the National Federation of the Blind, and you can encourage your employee to go and get training in the skills of blindness, adaptive techniques, cane travel, adjustment to blindness. NFB, for example, has 3 training centers that are world renowned. And if your employee takes the time to get training, then they're going to come back valuable with the tools that they need to succeed as a blind person.
Okay. The second question that was submitted, how do blind employees generally get back and forth to work?
Anil, you want to take that one? You touched on it in your segment.
Yeah. I was about to be a little flip, but this is not the time or space. Hopefully I'll get to know the participants here so we can have a little fun with this particular question. But it is a very legitimate question because, again, as I was saying, it's the lack of knowledge that creates the barriers. So any way that other individuals get to work other than driving. So a lot of blind individuals take public transportation to and from work, whether it be trains or buses, et cetera. We have taxis and rideshare options to get back and forth to work. We can share rides with other coworkers. If you see the theme here, it's not really uniquely different in any other way than many of the other employees, blind or otherwise, are going to be getting to work. So I think that's important to understand. And there are some other avenues, like their paratransit services that some blind people use, et cetera. And I also like to offer at this particular time, the National Federation of the Blind is working aggressively with autonomous vehicle developers, so that who knows, maybe that blind person will be able to drive themselves to work in their own autonomous vehicle someday in the future.
Yeah, I took the Blue Line and the 66 bus downtown Chicago for 28 years.
Good for you.
Next question.
Yes. What kinds of costs do employers typically incur when they hire a blind employee?
Let me say really quickly that there really isn't typical. Everyone's need for accommodations is different. I've seen a study that gave an average cost, but because accommodations are so different for each and every disabled person, I can give one example, which is me. When I started at the city of Chicago, they did pay for a screen reading software program for me in the maintenance agreement. So at that time, and this was 1988, I think it cost $500.
Yeah, and I would like to add a little bit to that. To Patty's point, it is unique to each individual and also unique to whatever job they're being employed. Now, for employers, I'll just offer this, that it may create some financial hardship to actually purchase whatever maybe access technology a blind person may need. There are resources through the state vocational rehabilitation agencies that can help assist with that. But I wouldn't want the employers to kind of defer to the VR services as that conduit. I would rather that the employer adopt a perspective that this is an investment. that they're making in an employee. And back to my Wachovia example, the amount of time and energy spent to onboard that first blind employee kind of reached economies of scale as we onboarded more blind staff. But that investment more than paid off in so many different ways. So I encourage you not to look at it as a burden, look at it truly as a cost of doing business, but really an investment in increasing the diversity, equity, inclusion, but also productivity and bottom line of your business.
Okay, thank you. And let's see, the last question that we received before the webinar, even if blind people can do the job, aren't blind employees going to be slower and less efficient at accomplishing tasks?
Well, I can start with this one. I think John really answered it well, but when I was working at the city and I got promoted to supervising prosecutor, imagine this, supervising lawyers. It's a lot like herding cats. They offered me the option of having a goal of supervising 4,000 cases a year, and everyone else had a goal of 7,000. And keep in mind, this is not LA law, it's administrative law, so 4,000 is not that demanding to supervise. I said no, and by the time I left, I was supervising 14,000 cases a year. That was the highest number that they had throughout the entire department. So I think blind employees are like anybody else, and you need to set expectations, but certainly don't expect us to be slower or less productive. Do we have any other questions that came in?
Let me echo, just reinforce the whole expectations piece. Again, using the Wachovia example, if you go into this having a low expectation, think that the blind person cannot be productive, then guess what's going to happen? Chances are the blind person is not going to be productive. But if you set the expectation for them to be equally productive as decided, and even in many instances, more productive, you set a goal that really kind of is the catalyst for the adoption of a strategy that can result in increased productivity across the board.
People rise to the expectations we set.
I'm sorry, Patty, to step on you there. I've got just a quick real world example here as well too. So we use a software here in my company. The one we happen to use is TeamViewer, but it allows us to remote into our employees or other people's computers and walk through things, troubleshoot, do a number of different things. And from that perspective, I myself am a sighted person, standard computer operator, mouse, keyboard, etc. And when I log in to our blind employees' computers and we're talking and troubleshooting and things along those lines, obviously they are not using a mouse. And I have to laugh, but it drives me crazy as well too, because I can't keep up with them. I'm trying to read things and move around the screen and things, and there's 3 steps ahead of me in that from that perspective.
And there's a lot of our sighted staff that have learned the different keystrokes that we use as blind people to navigate the computer, and they've defaulted to using those as well because they are quicker, more efficient than using a mouse.
So another question has just come in. How do we enhance lateral and upward mobility opportunities for blind employees? Wow,
great question. Anil, I'm going to throw that one to you.
Well, before I answer that, I just want to state that this is so important. There's data out there, and people are talking about how people with disabilities are such loyal employees, and they make it sound like you hire a blind person, they're going to stay there forever, which is probably the case, but not because of any kind of misguided loyalty outside of what others may feel a degree of loyalty to the company, but because we have very few exit opportunities to seek other employment due to the bias and the misconceptions and the discrimination that we face. If blind people had the opportunity to exit and obtain employment in other areas as dynamically as sighted people, then our degree of loyalty to a company would be equal to the degree of loyalty that any sighted staff has. And I think that should be key, because if you want to promote loyalty, you should create an environment that promotes loyalty. But related to the hiring of blind people, I'll revert back to the Wachovia example. It's safe. Wachovia is no longer in existence, but we had those blind individuals working in that call center, and that's where they were to stay. I mean, you saw how wonderful it was. So it was kind of the flagship kind of implementation. But then I started getting calls from many of the blind employees that were applying for jobs to work over in the fraud department, over in collections, and no, it's like you stay here. This is where the blind people work. So we had to go back in and re-educate beyond just that particular circle. That the fraud department and the collections agency. That yeah, these individuals who have proven their productivity and value in the customer service area could also bring that to your areas as well. So the lateral opportunities there had to be kind of a re-education or a broader education, I'll say, for the corporation. So creating those lateral opportunities is the only way you're really going to be able to capitalize on this evolution of thought, so that you can really capitalize on the talent that blind people can bring to your space. And again, the upper mobility is also very important. We haven't come up with a name. Maybe you guys can come up with a name. It's not quite the glass ceiling, but there's a low expectation ceiling for blind people that they will ascend no further than this point. And I just know that there are a host of blind entrepreneurs out there that are really being disruptive and shaking up the world. And why would you not want someone with that talent as one of the executives in your business? So lateral and upward mobility are extremely important.
So the next question is, we are committed to inclusion and diversity because we believe it makes our solutions better. Do you have a technical special interest group that we can get involved in?
Neil?
If I understand that correctly, there's several ways I can answer. One is we have been, as the National Federation of Blind, been very proactive in reaching out to some of the employee resource groups or business resource groups or employee equity groups or whatever you're calling them, to make sure that we can have these types of discussions with those individuals within your organization that are charged with the responsibility of including disability as part of your disability, equity, and inclusion initiatives. And then within our organization, we have a host of specialized divisions, et cetera, that really capitalize in a variety of different professional areas. We have our National Association of Blind Merchants, which is a host of blind entrepreneurs. We have a division for blind lawyers, blind teachers. So just a host of professional acumen there, human services professionals, et cetera. So if you're looking at trying to tap into professionals in a specific area to really kind of get advice on how what tools they're using or strategies they're using to be professionals in their field, we have that resource available to you as well.
Okay, the next question, do you have suggestions on how to encourage business-to-business partners? Are there laws governing this or business agreement language that is commonly used?
Yes,
I think I'm going to, yeah, please.
Several different answers to that as well. And again, I'm hoping that you're not relying on this to be the definitive answer, and this will stimulate encourage you to reach out to us to give a more direct answer. But yeah, there are laws in place, and we as an organization have that reputation of being successful in that space, but that's really not our primary resource. Our primary ability to change the world, to allow blind people to live, work, and play in our communities is the relationships that we build. So we build very robust, substantive relationships with a variety of our corporate partners. And then in turn, we find synergies between our corporate partners so that they can work well with one another. Related to document accessibility, that's something that we're continuing to work on. We believe that the technology is out there, we know that the technology is out there so that at the creation and the design of not only just documents, but web spaces and technology, et cetera, it's possible to make it non-visually accessible to blind individuals with ease. Making things non-visually accessible is not an extra or a burden. It's just standard if you do it correctly. And not only does it make these devices, websites, and documents accessible to blind individuals, it creates a multimodal way for you to communicate with everyone. There's so many sighted people out there that use the things that were designed for blind people to use non-visually, talking GPS devices, et cetera. So yes, there is law, but we rather encourage the corporations to recognize that there's a business benefit to doing it in a way that is inclusive and provides access to blind people, which creates greater access to everyone.
And I would just add a couple of examples. Do you know that the first scanners were actually developed for blind people so that we could OCR convert print documents? And documents that are accessible and put out on the web are much more searchable. You put out a PDF that's a picture, which is the worst example of inaccessibility, versus a document that is text-based, and a search engine will include in its search the text-based document. It can't include the picture. Well, that's not just helpful to me as a blind person, it's helpful to everyone who's searching, and it's helpful to you because it helps people find your stuff. Do we have another question? Let me check the time.
So those are all the questions that we have right now, unless somebody has something else that they would like to share or offer.
No raised hands. So I'm going to stress that if you wish to explore opportunities or questions, we're going to put up contact information for all the presenters. And if you want to explore partnerships, you can contact us at outreach@nfb, as in National Federation Blind.org. Did we get anything else in? If not, we'll probably close.
No, nothing else in chat.
Thank you so much for joining us. Anil, do you have anything that you want to close with?
I guess you were going down that road. I want to thank you guys. I hope that if this is your first step in reaching out to try to explore this as opportunities, I hope it's not your last. If you have already started exploring this, hopefully we've been able to enhance the research that you've already acquired, but I just really emphasize that a deeper dive, a deeper conversation around this issue, I think will bring fruit. So we encourage you to continue to reach out to us and find ways that we can partner together.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Thank you all for joining us.